An unknown virus creates panic in New York City. The outbreak strikes without warning, threatening 20 million lives.
All right, sir, calm down. It's fine.
Scientists have never seen anything like it. The deadly virus resists every effort to treat it. As the disease spreads beyond the city to neighboring states, health officials fight to protect the entire country from a new and fatal disease. Some of the names in this program have been changed. In the summer of 1999, a mysterious virus first appeared in Queens, New York, a bustling community just a few miles from the concrete and skyscrapers of Manhattan. On August 12th, paramedics arrived at Flushing Hospital Medical Center with a 60-year-old man. Bill Turner was dehydrated and had a high fever. He was barely conscious. Turner had taken a few days off from work because he felt like he had the flu. Now, he was too weak to move. Turner's wife, Lily, was frantic. Emergency physicians had no way of knowing they were dealing with a virus that had never been seen in the Western Hemisphere.
Let's go ahead and give him a 500cc bolus of normal saline, and let's get those antibiotics running. Let's go draw some blood cultures as well.
Doctors ordered IV fluids to stabilize Turner and counter his dehydration. Based on the symptoms, the attending physician thought it looked like a case of pneumonia. He reassured Lily Turner. With fluids, rest, and antibiotic treatment, he anticipated a quick recovery. But within hours, Turner became disoriented. He was gasping for breath. He didn't recognize his own wife.
Nurse!
Turner became agitated. He had to be transferred to the intensive care unit. In the ICU, Bill Turner developed a frightening new symptom.
Lab tests look pretty good, but
He could no longer move his arms or legs.
let us go ahead and take care of it.
Lily Turner tried to remain calm as doctors explained her husband's worsening condition. With Bill's muscle weakness and his disorientation, they believed an infection was causing the dangerous swelling in his brain. The director of infectious diseases, Dr. Deborah Asnis, was paged by the ER. She was alarmed by Turner's rapid decline.
I was concerned that someone that's 60 years old, who's a highly functioning individual, goes to work and is very active, could be so debilitated without a good answer.
Well, the initial lab tests look okay. His chest X-ray is clear. We're really not really sure.
Dr. Asnis thought Turner might have encephalitis, an inflammation of the brain.
Yeah, what?
To find the cause of the inflammation, doctors performed a spinal tap. When looking for problems that affect the brain, spinal fluid is an important diagnostic tool. Turner's spinal fluid contained unusually high levels of protein in white blood cells, evidence that he had contracted a viral infection. Doctors were now certain Bill Turner had viral encephalitis. There was nothing they could do to fight the virus. They could only fight the symptoms. Asnis prescribed steroids to reduce the swelling in his brain and hoped his body would fight off the infection. But one of his symptoms didn't make sense.
I was concerned because I had not seen such severe muscle weakness with encephalitis.
Bill Turner now needed a respirator to breathe. In her many years of practice, Asnes had never seen anything like it. No one had. A page pulled her back to the ER. Days after the first case, Harold Marsh of Queens had suffered a massive heart attack. He was revived at the scene by paramedics. Now, his temperature was hovering at 105 degrees. Fevers this high are a dangerous and uncommon symptom in a heart attack patient. There was more to the case than heart disease alone.
Dr. Asnes? Hi.
The lab results on Harold Marsh were surprising. In addition to the heart attack, he had somehow contracted viral encephalitis. 2 encephalitis patients in the same week worried Dr. Asnes.
All right, thank you.
6 days later, paramedics rushed Marcus Hammond to the emergency room. Hammond showed the same muscle weakness and high fever as the other 2 patients. His fever tremors were so severe, the entire bed was shaking.
The third patient eventually needed to be put on a respirator and developed severe muscle weakness as well. But before he came to the hospital, he was a very active person at home. And this came on very suddenly within a 24-hour period. And I was concerned.
In an average year, Flushing Hospital treats only 2 encephalitis cases. Now, Dr. Asnes had seen 3 cases inside of 1 week.
I thought that this was too unusual to have, this cluster like this in the intensive care unit. So I did think at that point that there was something going on.
Observing hospital protocol, she notified the New York City Health Department. At the department's Manhattan offices, Dr. Annie Fine was both skeptical and concerned.
Both of us thought, well, I guess it could be some kind of cluster of encephalitis cases, but that's pretty unusual. And we both were somewhat skeptical, but open-minded.
Because viral infections can be highly contagious, Dr. Fine wondered if the patients could have passed the disease to each other. To try and find out whether that was a possibility, Fine and a colleague met with Dr. Asnes. They obtained exhaustive family histories. Doctors asked a series of questions dealing with the patient's habits, diet, and daily routine.
We really racked our brains to think of any way that these people could have been together or had people in common with them that could have passed an infection from one person to another.
No one who had come in contact with the patients was sick. Apparently, the virus was not passed from person to person. Dr. Asnes tried to reassure the families, but there was little more she could tell them. The doctors were dealing with something they'd never seen before.
The difficulty in these cases was that it was hard to tell the family what was causing the disease in their family member. I mean, we knew that there was encephalitis, but the actual agent of what was causing the encephalitis, we had no idea.
To determine how far the disease had spread, they contacted area hospitals. They found that 3 other patients in the Queens area were being treated for the same symptoms.
Our level of concern by the end of the day was much, much higher than it had been at the beginning of the day. I think both having additional cases and also having found that we felt these cases really had certain very striking similarities really increased our level of concern that we had in some kind of cluster or outbreak on our hands.
That night, health officials sent an alert to the medical community. Dr. Fine instructed area hospitals to report all cases of encephalitis to the Department of Health.
Normally in New York City, we do hear about cases of encephalitis. They get reported to the health department, but prior to 1999, the number of cases reported per year in the city was 8 to 12 in a city of 8 million people. And here we were in a small community in northern Queens with possibly 6 cases at the same time. So you can see that that would be something really rather dramatic.
All of the patients lived in a small neighborhood in Queens. For health officials, this was more evidence that they were dealing with an unusual cluster. Investigators from the New York Department of Health traveled to northern Queens to search for clues. Dr. Dennis Nash, an epidemic intelligence officer with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is assigned to New York City. He specializes in tracking diseases to their source.
We were actively looking for environmental things around their home or things about their neighborhoods, neighborhood factors that could have resulted in some common exposure causing their illness, because we did know that the patients lived, within a few square miles of one another.
Typically, viral outbreaks thrive in overcrowded urban neighborhoods. But less than 10 miles from Manhattan, the neighborhood in northern Queens was like a different world.
It seemed like it would be a lot more urban, but in fact it seemed almost suburban in some areas where these cases lived. There were lots of trees and single homes and lawns and yards and pools, and this was not at all what I had expected.
Investigators visited the home of Harold Marsh. He was one of the first patients infected. They needed to talk to his wife, Paula, about her husband's daily routine. Paula mentioned that Harold spent a lot of time in the backyard, especially when he couldn't sleep. There, investigators found several buckets of stagnant water. Paula explained that her husband collected rainwater to use in the garden. In one of the buckets, Nash spotted mosquito larvae. Mosquitoes can act as vectors or carriers of viral disease. He took several samples for testing.
Must be a lot of mosquitoes out here.
Some of the patients provided another possible clue to the source. They told investigators that they often took walks along the East River. Nash and his colleague drove to the area. There, the investigators found several pools of stagnant water, ideal breeding grounds for disease-carrying mosquitoes. Water samples revealed hundreds of writhing mosquito larvae. These insects deliver more illness than any other living thing. Every year, nearly 3 million people die of mosquito-borne diseases.
We were very concerned that we were dealing with a possible mosquito-borne viral encephalitis outbreak.
Scientists at the New York State Health Department examined the larvae. There are 25,000 species of mosquitoes. They had to find out which one they were dealing with. The lab's findings read like a worst-case scenario. They suspected their culprit was the Culex mosquito, the most common mosquito in the world. Highly mobile and with a lifespan of several days, every street in America has thousands of them. Although scientists were able to determine that Culex mosquitoes were breeding in the neighborhood, they could not tell whether the insects were carrying a virus. As doctors struggled for answers, the outbreak took a terrifying turn. On September 1st, 1999, the mysterious virus claimed its first victim. Harold Marsh was the second encephalitis case admitted to Flushing Hospital. Despite the medical team's efforts to save him, Marsh had grown weaker each day. With no hope of recovery, he was taken off life support. At autopsy, the medical examiner took tissue and blood samples from Marsh's body. The samples were sent to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. At the CDC, the patient's blood serum was mixed with a reagent and viewed under a microscope. Although the tests were not conclusive, all indications pointed to St. Louis encephalitis, an infection spread exclusively by mosquitoes. Then, a few miles from Queens, a vital clue in the investigation appeared. Workers at the Bronx Zoo discovered dead crows. The birds were taken to veterinary pathologist Dr. Tracy McNamara at the zoo's lab.
Here I am at the zoo dealing with encephalitic crows and encephalitic zoo birds, and I was like, whoa, I wonder if there could potentially be a link between what's going on in the bird kingdom and what's going on in the patients.
If the deaths were linked, she reasoned, the human outbreak could not be St. Louis encephalitis.
According to everything that had ever been published, birds are part of a cycle where they may be able to infect mosquitoes, but generally these viruses don't kill the birds. They don't cause disease in the birds.
Dr. McNamara was alarmed by the wave of bird deaths. She knew that crows have strong immune systems. They are normally resistant to disease. To find out why these birds died, she launched her own investigation. McNamara found dark patches and hemorrhaging at the back of the crow's skulls, which are signs of viral encephalitis. She prepared tissue samples from the birds. McNamara sent them to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In order to link the birds with the human encephalitis cases, health officials would need the resources of a sophisticated lab.
I was certain this was a viral problem, and I knew it wasn't something I had seen in all my years of experience. It was pretty scary.
At the CDC, the samples went to the head of the diagnostic laboratory, Dr. Robert Lanciotti. With this unusual finding, he decided to test the bird samples and the blood samples from the human victims.
We were assuming that this was St. Louis encephalitis, so we did a variety of tests looking for 4 or 5 different viruses at the same time, and the result we got was very unusual. We found that the virus did not react with any of our St. Louis tests at all.
Lanciotti entered his test results into an internet database. The search compared the genetic code of the mystery virus to every known virus in the world. Within seconds, he had a match.
I was shocked. In fact, I repeated the search over and over again, thinking that maybe this was some kind of computer error, because it was the most shocking thing that I could have imagined.
Dr. Lanciotti needed to get the word out fast. The virus was being passed by infected birds to mosquitoes, which were then passing it on to humans. And birds could spread the disease much faster and much farther than mosquitoes alone. Lanciotti realized millions of people could be at risk of contracting West Nile virus. In the late summer of 1999, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had identified the strange new mosquito-borne virus in New York as the West Nile virus. Mosquitoes usually transmit viruses by feeding on an infected host, such as a bird or a rodent. When they bite humans, they spread the disease. Days after the virus first appeared, another resident of Queens was rushed to the emergency room. Doctors suspected Todd Connolly was also suffering from swelling in his brain. He struggled violently as doctors and nurses tried to restrain him. Delirious, he didn't know where he was. Based on the symptoms, they suspected West Nile could be causing the infection. West Nile is endemic to Africa, Eastern Europe, parts of Asia, and the Middle East. Somehow, the virus made its way across the ocean and into New York City.
There's really three possibilities that most people consider for how West Nile virus got into the United States. Either on an infected bird, an infected human, or somehow an infected mosquito got into this country. All three of those theories have been looked at in the best way that we can, and to my knowledge, there has not been a clear theory that has been proven. There's just speculation. We really don't know.
Health officials didn't know how the virus got here, but they knew it could have devastating effects. To stop the deadly virus, they had to try to find a way to destroy the mosquitoes. First, they contacted the office of Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. They informed him there was an outbreak of West Nile virus. With new cases appearing daily, there was no time to waste. The mayor's office scheduled a press conference.
So I rode out to the press conference with the health commissioner very quickly with lights and sirens, met the mayor out there, met officials from the Office of Emergency Management and other city officials, so everybody was kind of gathering at this point.
Mayor Giuliani warned citizens about the outbreak. He tried to reassure the public.
You know, obviously, it's easy to say to people, don't panic, they shouldn't. We'll do everything that we can to try to wipe out the mosquito population, deal with and treat the people who may be bitten and may be affected by it.
The mayor went on to say that the city would spray for mosquitoes in the affected areas. They would begin spraying within 24 hours. After the press conference, Fine met one-on-one with citizens who were concerned about the mosquitoes. As a doctor, she was worried about the grave implications of this new and deadly virus.
To a public health practitioner or a physician, that's a very, very major finding, to find a virus in an entirely new continent where it has never been present before. It's an enormous discovery, and it's a very worrisome discovery because you don't know exactly how that virus is going to behave there.
West Nile virus was a new disease in a city that had no way to fight it.
There hadn't been an outbreak due to a mosquito-borne virus in a very long time. We didn't have a mosquito control program in place. We have a very, very large and city and a very dense population, so there was no telling how many cases really this could cause, and as I mentioned, it could be very severe. So we were very concerned, very worried.
Officials launched the largest mosquito eradication effort in the history of New York City. Aerial spraying took place late evening and early morning hours when the insects are most active. Workers sprayed pesticides throughout the city to kill adult mosquitoes. They also targeted breeding grounds to stop the insects from reproducing. Once infected, a female mosquito can pass the virus to hundreds of her offspring. Ground crews spread pesticides to kill mosquito eggs and larvae. In the air, helicopters took surveys of standing water throughout New York. Health workers went door to door warning residents to get rid of standing water. They were also advised to stay inside after dark when mosquitoes are most active. And if they had to venture out, to use insect repellent and wear long sleeves and pants. The health department set up a 24-hour hotline where concerned citizens could turn for answers. Calls flooded in. Many callers had questions about pesticides and mosquito control. Hundreds of New Yorkers called to report finding dead crows in their yards. Dr. Fine suspected the dead crows were an ominous sign.
I was worried about it because I thought this outbreak is actually much bigger than what we were thinking.
In late September, the virus crossed state lines. In Greenwich, Connecticut, a dead crow was found near a golf course. The bird was delivered to the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station.
You say when it died?
Dr. Theodore Andreadis contacted a veterinary pathologist to examine the bird and determine the cause of death. Andreadis instructed his team to set up mosquito traps where the dead bird was found.
There was a great potential for a human outbreak to occur here in Connecticut as well, so it was very important for us to get out and test mosquitoes to find out how significant a threat it was, and to examine this crow mortality to see if we could tie the two together.
Before scientists could begin testing the mosquitoes for viruses, they had to identify them by species. Connecticut has more than 40 different types of mosquitoes, and not all of them feed on humans.
Certain mosquitoes will feed only on birds, some will feed on amphibians, and others will feed on mammals. If we find the virus in a human-biting mosquito, then we know we have a significant threat and some public health measures have to be put into place.
After the mosquitoes were sorted, scientists tested them for viruses. The painstaking process would tell them if any of the insects were carrying some type of virus. The samples were placed in vials of liquid and agitated to break up the mosquito's mass. Scientists then extracted the fluid and incubated it for several days. If a virus was present, the liquid would appear cloudy. In this case, there was no doubt about the results. Under the microscope, scientists confirmed the viral cultures showed evidence of growth. Technicians at the CDC determined that the mosquitoes were carrying West Nile virus.
Kelly, how are we
With
doing?
the news that West Nile was now in Connecticut, Dr. Andreadis shared the public's concern.
How many we have finished now? Well, I think it's the general fear that, you know, you're out and enjoying yourself and all of a sudden you could get bitten by a mosquito, a tiny little mosquito that could be carrying a deadly virus.
By November of 1999, cold weather had come to the Northeast, and the active mosquito populations in New York and Connecticut died off. But under the snow, millions of eggs were lying in wait. Only time would tell if the virus would survive the winter freeze to claim more victims in the warmth of the coming summer. In the summer of 1999, New York City was gripped by a deadly outbreak. 62 patients had been hospitalized. 7 of them died. In addition, nearly 15,000 birds, most of them crows, died from the infection. A winter freeze killed the mosquitoes and appeared to have stopped the virus from spreading. But West Nile had survived. As the summer of 2000 approached, health officials were worried. The mosquito population was beginning to emerge, along with the West Nile virus. The disease spread throughout the Northeast. It claimed victims as far south as North Carolina and as far west as Pennsylvania. Elderly patients were most at risk, as well as patients with weakened immune systems. As the summer of 2000 wore on, the death toll climbed. The virus showed no signs of stopping. Over the next 2 years, West Nile had spread to nearly 30 states. Louisiana was hit hardest. Warm temperatures and abundant waterways made it the ideal breeding ground for disease-carrying mosquitoes. In Baton Rouge, Judy Simmons' mother was the first victim of West Nile virus.
It's a very bad way to die.
Judy Simmons was with her mother during the final moments.
I called both of my children. I didn't tell my grandchildren that their grandmother was dying. I just said, you need to tell, your grandmother that you love her, and you'll talk to her soon. And she died.
80 people were infected in Louisiana. The governor called a state of emergency.
On oxygen, feeding tube, she couldn't eat. It's horrible.
Louisiana spent millions of dollars to track the outbreak and get rid of the mosquitoes. But no amount of spraying can wipe out the mosquito population, according to Randy Vaith, a biologist with the East Baton Rouge Parish Mosquito Control.
You're not going to be able to completely control the mosquito populations. You can educate people to where they are not going to be exposed to the mosquitoes carrying it, and you can reduce those populations down significantly, but you're still going to have some mosquitoes and you're going to have some humans bitten.
Health officials were fighting a losing battle. 2 years into the outbreak, birds and mosquitoes had spread the West Nile virus further south and west. By midsummer 2002, the West Nile virus had infected hundreds of new victims and claimed dozens of lives. Still, health officials warned that the disease was only midway through its peak season. So far, the virus had attacked the weak and the elderly, but that was all about to change. In late August of 2002, 36-year-old Tracy Hollis drove to Peoria from her house in the Illinois countryside. Tracy worked on the housekeeping staff at St. Francis Medical Center. As the mother of 4 children, Tracy led an active and busy life. But for the past few days, she suffered from headaches and fatigue. Tracy's mother, Janet Ferris, was concerned.
She said that she just didn't feel right. She didn't know what it was. She was having slight dizziness.
But the dizziness was getting worse by the minute. As she headed inside, her legs gave out.
She managed to pick herself up, and she went a little further, hanging on to cars and stop signs and things like that, and she collapsed a second time.
Tracy couldn't understand what was happening to her. Her legs felt shaky.
Hi, can I help you?
She made her way to the hospital's emergency room.
Teresa, can you grab that wheelchair, please? What's going on today?
Nurses in the ER took Tracy to an exam room and paged the emergency physician.
Here you go.
Dr. Paul Matthews examined Tracy that morning.
Tracy had symptoms consistent with a flu-like illness. She had fever, headache, body aches, some generalized fatigue and weakness, and she also had some cramping in her lower legs.
Although Tracy was weak and disoriented, she was able to communicate her symptoms to the doctor.
She also had a fever of 104.5. She had a headache, she had a stiff neck, and she also had some weakness in her legs. In fact, she had trouble walking and trouble maintaining her balance.
Dr. Matthews believed Tracy's symptoms were consistent with encephalitis and meningitis, and inflammation of the lining around the brain. The West Nile virus can cause these conditions. But West Nile doesn't usually strike someone so young. And Tracy had developed a very troubling symptom. She was suffering with severe paralysis. Her polio-like symptoms had never previously been associated with West Nile virus. Doctors were not certain of a diagnosis. They feared that if the paralysis intensified, Tracy might not survive. Doctors in Peoria, Illinois, frantically looked for answers to diagnose the illness that threatened the life of 36-year-old Tracy Hollis. They believed she had West Nile virus, but were waiting for test results to confirm. Her severe paralysis puzzled doctors. They had never seen anything like it. Dr. Matthews ordered a battery of additional tests, including a spinal tap and MRI, or magnetic resonance imaging. They hoped the MRI would allow them to better see the cause of her debilitating paralysis. Using radio waves, the machine performs a scan of the brain. It allows doctors to see a two-dimensional model of the tissue in the brain and detect swelling, blood flow, and any abnormal growths. The test confirmed the swelling in Tracy's brain. She had meningitis, but that didn't identify the source of her paralysis. Dr. David Slagle, chief of infectious disease at the hospital, was called in to consult on Tracy's case. He suspected her fever and the meningitis were caused by the West Nile virus. Dr. Slagle spoke with Tracy's family. He told them they weren't certain what was causing the extensive paralysis. Tracy's mother was scared.
Tracy has always been a very healthy young woman. She's never been hospitalized for anything, hardly ever has the flu. I knew that when her legs would not work, it had to be something serious. Of course, I was thinking the worst. I did not know what it was. I was thinking, multiple sclerosis or maybe a stroke, something to that effect.
Samples of Tracy's spinal fluid were shipped to the state lab for testing. The lab test would take several days. Dr. Slagle kept a close watch on Tracy. He wanted to make sure she didn't have any other complications as a result of her illness. Several days later, Tracy's test came back. Doctors now had confirmation. Tracy had West Nile virus, but the cause of her paralysis was still a mystery.
The unusual feature of Tracy's infection was the weakness in her legs. The fact that she is younger than most of the patients we see with symptomatic West Nile virus infection was also concerning.
Tracy's family stayed by her side. There was little the staff could do for her beyond supporting her with intravenous fluids and nutrition.
She was in and out of sleep. She'd drift in and out. She didn't say much. She was very quiet. I was very frightened.
Hi, Tracy.
Over the following week, her family became hopeful that Tracy's life was no longer in danger. Tracy's body began to win the battle against West Nile. Her fever dropped and the swelling in her brain tissue subsided. But partial paralysis in her legs remained. The virus had attacked the nerves in her spinal column, leaving extensive damage. 2 agonizing weeks after her illness first started, Tracy was finally well enough to go home. But the question of her paralysis remained unsettled.
We couldn't tell her how quickly it would get better. We couldn't tell her to what extent she might have some residual leg weakness after the infection was resolved. These are uncertainties in regards to an infection that's new in this country that we simply can't tell at this point in time what the ultimate prognosis for many patients will be.
When Tracy came home from the hospital, she needed help from her mother and the rest of her family. Everyday chores were difficult.
I'm just not the same person as I was before this happened. I move a lot slower, and it takes me about 5 minutes to go down my steps, just because I take one step and rest and take another and rest again. And there's pain in my leg after I'm done walking that far, so I have to sit down and rest.
Over several months, Tracy has worked hard to regain her mobility. Her mother has watched the toll the illness has taken on Tracy and her family.
Tracy was very active with her children before this happened. Any night of the week, you would see her out walking with her children or having them over to the local park, playing with them. They camped a lot, but she's unable to do these things anymore, and the children miss that part of their life, I'm sure of it.
Throughout her ordeal, Tracy has tried to remain positive.
When something like this happens, you sit back and you think of all the things you do have instead of always think about the things you don't have. And you tend to appreciate the tiny things, like just walking outside in the fresh air. I mean, I almost had that taken away. It's pretty scary.
In addition to the support of her family, physical therapy has played a key role in her rehabilitation.
Any pain on that side? Counting.
The therapy wears me out because it's working the leg muscles, and my leg just isn't the same as it was before this happened. The doctors believe that I will have 100% usage of my leg, but it's just going to take a lot of work and time on my part. I'd like to be out walking with my children a year from now and doing the same thing I was doing before this happened.
As Tracy works to regain her life one step at a time, the West Nile virus races on. The news that West Nile can cause paralysis is a terrifying development. Doctors struggle to understand this disease as it evolves. There seems to be little they can do to stop it. By the end of the summer of 2002, it was on the move again. Spread by mosquitoes, West Nile virus first appeared in the United States in a small community in Queens, New York in the summer of 1999. Within 3 years, every state east of the Rockies was battling the deadly virus. West Nile moved like wildfire across the country. By the end of the summer of 2002, West Nile reached California. Experts believe that in time, the virus will reach every state in the U.S. and eventually spread throughout the Western Hemisphere. Its effects will be far-reaching, according to the CDC's Dr. Robert Lanciotti.
West Nile virus has drastically changed the public health infrastructure in this country, and I've seen incredible changes. Prior to 1999, there were only a limited number of state public health labs that had extensive testing for mosquito and tick-borne viruses.
The CDC has mounted an enormous effort to diagnose and combat the disease. Early detection is important, and since 1999, state health labs have been trained by the CDC to increase their testing of infectious disease.
They're able to test for West Nile, so they don't have to wait for samples to be collected and shipped to us to do their testing. They can test right in their own jurisdiction and learn very early on if there's West Nile.
But scientists can't test everyone coming into the country. Every day, thousands of airplanes carry hundreds of thousands of passengers in and out of the United States, making it easier to transport disease.
We need to be really on the lookout and alert for new diseases, unexpected diseases, things that happen in one place that may not have happened or even been reported in another place, like, for example, bird deaths.
West Nile has affected over 100 species of birds. The future of many more remains uncertain. Those species that are currently threatened, like the bald eagle, are most at risk.
We don't know what impact it'll have on bird populations. Perhaps over time, birds will build up some immunity and we won't see these large die-offs. But I think in the short term, we're going to see this continue. This West Nile virus is permanently established here in the United States. It's going to persist, it won't go away.
Migrating birds will continue to spread the virus. No one is safe from the bite of an infected mosquito. Mosquitoes will never successfully be eradicated. There are millions in every backyard in America. For now, there is no cure or vaccine to fight the disease. The best defense is precaution and prevention against the mosquitoes that carry West Nile. Across the country, states are working to control the mosquito populations to keep residents safe.
We will always have a risk of an outbreak. We will always have a risk that this virus could cause an outbreak, especially in urban areas.
Since it first appeared in 1999, there have been nearly 4,000 cases of West Nile virus reported in the United States, and over 200 fatalities. Scientists are working to develop a vaccine in the next 3 years. Until then, health officials can only hope to limit the disease's reach and to wait and see what next summer will bring.